Yes, God is sovereign over all things, and He's going to use this trial to grow your faith and rejoice in that because of that. But sometimes you're going through trials because of your sin. And that's just you. You made that bad decision, and now you're paying for it. You put your money in the wrong stock, and that's why it's crashed. That's not God that did it. Do you see the difference? Let me give you one example from 1 Peter chapter 4 through 12. The reason why I think this is important is because sometimes not all suffering is something that God is using to test you. It can be, like James talks about, right? Trials are meant to test your faith, to grow it. But sometimes you suffer because you're stupid. It's your fault. It's like, how can you say that, Andrew? Well, look at Peter. He makes distinctions in suffering. 1 Peter 4. He said, beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you. So he talks about first, there are going to be trials of fire. This is what James talks about, right? There are things like God is the one who's using the trials to test you. So those exist. This is not your fault. You didn't do something wrong. This is not karma. It's just the trials that God is allowing to come into your life to refine your faith. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering, that you may also rejoice and be glad when the glory is revealed. But then look at the second part. He says, however, if you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed because the glory of Christ and God rests upon you. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or evildoer or as a meddler. Why is he adding that? Sometimes you have trials of sin. You know why you're suffering in jail? It's because you stole stuff. It's not God testing you. You stole stuff. You murdered somebody. You cheated on your spouse and your marriage is ruined. That's not God doing that. You did that. Do you see how this is the providence idea, sovereignty, but there's responsibility in the same passage. Yes, God is sovereign over all things, and He's going to use this trial to grow your faith and rejoice in that because of that. But sometimes you're going through trials because of your sin. And that's just you. You made that bad decision, and now you're paying for it. You put your money in the wrong stock, and that's why it's crashed. That's not God that did it. Do you see the difference? That's what Peter is saying. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God. So if you suffer in this way, don't be ashamed. Glorify God. God is working through you. But if you're suffering in this way, that's on you. That's not a God thing. Oh, nobody likes to be friends with me at work. Just because I'm so passionate about God. No, nobody likes to be friends with you because you're a jerk and nobody likes you. That has nothing to do with you being a Christian. I don't know why. Everyone thinks, everyone gets upset when every time I talk to them, I tell them they're going to hell, and now I don't have any friends. Yeah, because maybe you're just telling them they're going to hell every time you see them. They don't want to be friends. Do you see the difference? It's not everything is a God trial. Oh, what is God teaching me through this? Or what is God doing? Maybe God's just showing you, stop. Just stop being that person and change. So you have to have the discernment and wisdom to see the difference. Doesn't mean that everything that you go through in life is your fault. That's not what Peter's saying. He talked about the first part. Sometimes it's not your fault. This is what God is doing. But sometimes it is your fault, and you need to know the difference. That has to do with providence, because providence does not exclude human responsibility. We are still responsible for our actions. There are still consequences to our actions, but God is sovereign over all actions to bring about His intended result in such a way that doesn't excuse you, but that can use all things for His purposes. Finally, governance. Providence as governance. Here's a list of passages. But essentially what it means is that government refers to the continued activity of God whereby He rules all things teleologically. Now, what does that teleologically mean? So if God is working all things teleologically, it means that He refers to the ultimate end of all things. Everything He does has a certain end in mind. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the ends justify the means. God is not completely heartless. But what it does mean is that even in all this stuff, He still knows exactly where it's going to go. That's where He attends. So He attends a certain end to all things. And He ordains the ends. But the means by which we reach the ends is conditioned upon human responsibility. Going back to the Moses idea, God will get Israel into the promised land. That's the end. But whether it's Moses that does it or Joshua that does it, that all depends on Moses and Joshua, whoever. Theoretically, it could have been Moses if he didn't disobey. But he did, so he replaced Moses with who? Joshua. Right? Because the idea is that we are part of this means, we are dispensable. He doesn't have to use you to get to this end. He can use someone else to get to that end. God uses whoever is obedient and holy for his purposes. Like, there is no gifted person that's indispensable to God. Billy Graham is gone, somebody else will come on. Like, you don't have to panic because God has a certain end he will get to, but the means, it goes back to the concurrence idea. Well, it just, whoever's going to fill that gap will fill that gap. So whether it's you or the person next to you or next generation, it depends also on how you guys are living and responding. Right? Theoretically, could King Saul have stayed king? He could have, but he didn't because he wasn't a man after God's own heart and he didn't care for the things of God, right? So you kind of see that the consequences of human actions are still in the scripture. None of it gets excused over, glossed over. Oh, God ordained and he caused Saul to be. No, it doesn't say that. Saul did it. Or like God, regretted that he made the world because they became so corrupt by the time of Noah, so he just killed them and start over. It's like, I'm not going to continue with you guys. I'm going to make a new humanity after Noah, right? So teleologically, God has a certain end he is working all things towards. The means of how he gets there, though, does depend on the concurrence aspect of human responsibility.